Hello, Magic players. Welcome to Quiet Conversations. This is episode 2, Kamigawa Neon Dynasty Hot Takes. My name is Paul. I'm your host this evening. Joining me on the call are Adam, Beardy, David, and Jordan. How you guys doing?
Doing great.
Doing great.
Good. Before we begin, a reminder to all our listeners, this podcast is brought to you by quietspeculation.com. If you enjoy what you hear, myself and all our panelists produce weekly content, including articles and videos over there. Please check it out. If you like what you see, you can also consider supporting us by becoming a QS Insider. In addition to getting early access to insider content, QS Insiders also have access to the most robust collection management tool on the market. You can scan your collection using our Ion scanner, track prices, and generate all kinds of reports. For details, you can check out quietspeculation.com/tour2. Play more, win more, pay less. That's Quiet Speculation. Also note, if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe there to help support out getting our YouTube channel going. Thanks. So let's get into things with some general impressions. What are people's kind of initial responses to seeing the set in full? We'll kind of go around the horn here. Let's start with Adam.
This set seems like a step up in power level from the last few standard legal sets that we've had. Everything looks phenomenal, and I love the revitalization of Kamigawa as a concept and a property. It makes me really excited about potential returns to other planes that Wizards didn't enjoy the reception for. So like Alara, Lorwyn, I'm really excited to see what they can fix in those on the next return.
Beardy?
I'm going to start out with some props to Wizards. Let's talk about this real quick. There's Ward. There's phasing. There are sagas. Kaito's Pursuit helps rogues, not just ninjas. There are a bunch of cards that help samurai or warriors. There's Phyrexian mana. Wow. I mean, they've really delved through Magic's history and added all of that into this set. I'm very impressed by it. I'm looking forward to it tremendously.
David?
So, as someone who was playing a lot of Kamigawa back in the day, I really do enjoy coming back to it. I am very impressed with the visual design. I do take one issue with it. Everyone's talking about this as being a cyberpunk set. It's not. It's not. This might be cyberpunk, but if you're thinking it's cyberpunk, you're incorrect, as in the intellectual property. This is Shadowrun, a tabletop game that I love, and having it in Magic form, that's awesome. That's just straight up awesome.
Cool. Jordan?
First of all, the cyberpunk thing took the words out of my mouth. It's very important to have said that. So thank you, David, for mentioning it. In terms of the set mechanics, I totally agree with Beardy. There's a lot of diversity here. It's very robust. There's even modular. They're not calling it modular. I think they had a limit. We can't put too many keywords on the cards. Makes total sense. But there is a lot going on here. And I'm also excited about some of the design choices that they're making. So how they're bringing stuff together in novel ways. It even seems like it's overcrowded in the rare slot. They're shoving stuff down to common. So I'm going to talk about that later. But basically, there's a lot of power here and a lot of exciting designs.
Cool. So people understand this is not going to be, so our listeners understand this is not going to be a hot takes. This is going to be a hot takes episode. It's not going to be a full set review. We're going to kind of look at each format and talk about some of the cards that have us most excited to want to play with this new set. We're going to dive right in right now with Standard. And Adam, take it away. Tell us what you're most excited about for Standard.
So I went in a slightly different direction than like the typical, these are the strongest cards that are going to be coming out of Kamigawa, right? So we already know that the channel lands are going to see a ton of play in virtually every format. But there are a lot of role players that I think are a huge impact that we haven't seen before, or their new takes on existing ones. And I think those slight changes are fascinating. So first up, we have the Wandering Emperor. So this is a 2 white legendary planeswalker flash. That is the most important part to this card. It's ostensibly a combat trick that also can generate value. So you are interested in it as a top end for your white aggro decks and potentially for your control decks. When it enters the battlefield, you can activate loyalty abilities of the card at any time you could do an instant. So tick up, put 1 counter on up to 1 target creature, gets first strike. -1, make a 2/2 white samurai with vigilance, and -2, exile target tap creature, gain 2 life. It comes in with 3 loyalty. So this card does a lot of things. It can make a blocker and still walk away with a significant amount of loyalty. So it can, if untouched, down tick 3 times. It can tick up and give a blocker additional point of stats, as well as first strike, or make your attacking creatures win combat. So it does a lot of things in a very concise package, and I think that that is incredible across multiple different white-based archetypes. My second pick is March of Reckless Joy, and give me one moment while I bring that one up. So this is an X and a red instant, and it's part of a cycle that all does the same text. I assume that we're going to be talking about the other ones, but as a quick overview, as additional cost to cast it, you can exile any number of, in this case, red cards from your hand, and it costs 2 less for each card exiled this way. Exile the top X cards of your library. You can play up to 2 of them until the end of your next turn. So this is a take on the impulsive draw style cards, which see play in kind of niche areas across different archetypes and across different formats. This one, though, lets you dig a lot of cards and then gives you the time and the mana to be able to play them. And red is very good at dumping its hand of cards they don't necessarily need at the moment in favor of velocity or finding the individual combo piece that you want. So this card can find you the sideboard answer that you need for your polarized matchup. It can find you aggressive threats, or end step of your opponent's turn, you just dig for your top, 5, 6, 7 cards, or you get rid of a card in your hand that you don't necessarily need for that matchup, and you find something that is much more valuable. And then the last card that I have is Tamio Safekeeping, which is a 1 mana green instant. It gives target creature, so let me just make sure I'm reading this right, target permanent, you control gains hexproof, indestructible into end of turn, you gain 2 life. This is a card that we've seen a million times. You have Snakeskin Veil, which is currently 4 of in the mono green deck in Standard. Virtually any green-based aggressive deck in Standard, and in other cases, sideboard slots for like Historic Pioneer, etc. Play this as a oops, counter your removal spell. And that's fairly strong. You have Heroic Intervention, which is a 2 mana version of this effect that does it for all of your permanents. The key here is that this is half of that. It's 1 mana. It saves your creature from a target removal spell, saves your best threat from a Wrath effect, and incidentally, you gain 2 life. That's a lot packed into a single mana protection, effectively green counterspell. And it lets you go more so all in on a particular either Voltron style package, or just play undercosted threats, leave up this as protection, and then you can power through. Your opponent doesn't really have much recourse. So those are my 3 cards for Standard.
Do you see those plugging into existing archetypes, or do you see it creating new archetypes?
As of right now, I definitely see the Tamio Safekeeping plugging into the mono green deck that already exists. The Snow Green, despite losing Faceless Haven, they still have access to Blizzard Brawl, and they have strong cards at every step of the curve. March of Reckless Joy, I think that can slide into virtually any single red deck or red base deck in the format. Of course, it gets a bigger boost if you are heavy on red, because then you can dump your excess cards into it for additional digging. But I think that it's fine predominantly for red base control. And then Wandering Emperor, there is also a mono white deck in the format. I think this is an excellent top end for that deck.
Very cool. Okay, let's change pace from Standard then. Let's go to Modern, and let's go to Jordan. Jordan, tell us about the 3 cards that you're most jazzed about for the format.
All right, so the first one is Boseiju. Obviously, the channel lands, I'm calling them channel lands, are going to be a big hit in all constructed formats. But the 2 big ones that I wanted to talk about for Modern were Boseiju, who endures, and this is a legendary land. It enters, you can tap it for green mana, so it's like a strict upgrade to basic land in that sense, but it is a legend. And this one, the effect is you can pay 1 and a green and discard it with channel to destroy an artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land, and then its controller may search for a land with a basic land type, including a shock land. So they could get a Steam Vents with this because that has the basic land type island or mountain. And this ability costs 1 less to activate for each legend that you control. So if you have a Ragavan, for example, you can pay just G for it. And the other one here was Ottawara Ethereal City. This is 3 and a blue when you discard it to bounce a non-land permanent or creature. And I say it that way just to save on time, but they actually listed out every card type. They wanted to be able to bounce not lands that just tap for mana, but creature lands if that's happening. So this is kind of like a nice boost that they're doing for the first time where, hey, I can interact with like a creature land that's attacking me, a Mutavault, something like that. So the reason that these cards are so important for Modern specifically is because, and I did touch on this too in my insider piece from last week where I proposed a new brew that makes the most out of Boseiju specifically. Modern has always been as a format in a place where it needs general all-purpose answers to kind of like the random stuff that can happen in the format, like getting turned to Blood Moon, for example, or somebody going off with Solemnity combo. And so the ban list has really grown, or it was growing so much in the early days of Modern because there was so much stuff that people could just get you with. This is a format with no force of will, no days, and to bring these all-purpose answers that you can splash into any deck because you want to be tapping lands for blue mana and green mana anyway so that you can cast your spells is really a step in the right direction from Wizards, and one that they've been taking for a while now with cards like Prismatic Ending, and then earlier we had like Assassin's Trophy, which was like, hey, I can hit like more expensive things than Abrupt Decay with this, but those are tougher to splash. Like literally only rock decks and control decks that are green and black, which are kind of like bad control decks, can play cards like Assassin's Trophy. So this is great. It's kind of like opening it up and democratizing all-purpose general answers, which I really, really like so to see from Wizards. And I'm not going to harp too much on the channel lands beyond that, because clearly they are very good. But there is another land that I wanted to talk about, which is Secluded Courtyard. So this is a land that's a strict upgrade of Unclaimed Territory. When it enters the battlefield, you get to choose a creature type, and it taps for colorless or taps for 1 mana of any color to cast one of those creatures or to activate an ability of a creature with that creature type, which means that you can tap it to activate like an Eldrazi Displacer, for example, and produce white mana for that. So this is just a slightly better Unclaimed Territory, and Unclaimed Territory was already a great card in Modern, seeing a lot of play in the Humans deck, in addition to in other tribal decks, like we have an Elementals deck that runs it. But now I'm seeing decks like Changeling combo with Magda. I think that we're reaching finally a critical mass of these lands that tap for any color to support a certain creature type, such that in Modern, you can basically play 5-color tribal of whatever your favorite type is, which is really interesting for types that go across different colors. Not so much stuff like vampires or goblins, but stuff like spirits. We have great spirits in every color. Even in this set, we got some really cool red spirits and cool black spirits. So it's going to be super interesting as they print more cards in future sets too that support those card types and that generate combos with those card types to see these decks spring up in Modern as they do. So it's very promising as well. I also want to mention that Ancient Ziggurat is played in Humans right now. It's like 4 Cavern, 4 Territory, 4 Ziggurat, and then they also play 5 Canopy lands and 2 basics. That's the whole mana base. So I think those last 7 lands aren't going anywhere, but they can just take out the Ziggurats now and play this new land, Secluded Courtyard, which allows them to play the Ether Vials more consistently on turn 1 because Ziggurat doesn't tap for mana that, see David nodding his head. He's kind of like our Modern tribal deck expert anyway. So, but yeah, you could also play like Collected Company in these decks now a lot more easily. So these are all big boons for the kinds of tribal decks that might want these non-creature spells that really support the tribe as well. So I'm excited to see what we get.
Do you think Humans is the tribal deck that's going to benefit the most from this land?
I would say absolutely at first because it's such an obvious include, but I don't think it does so much for Humans because Humans is already a deck that gets a lot of mileage out of Ancient Ziggurat relative to other tribes that might need to depend more on something like Collected Company that they can't cost off of the Ziggurat. And previous to Kamigawa, they might not have had enough of these gold lands to really justify, like it's too much tension.
Okay.
In the deck. There's one more thing I wanted to mention before I kind of pass the torch here, which is Aki Emberkeeper. That's 1 and a red for a 2/1 enchantment Goblin Warrior. And it has whenever a non-token modified creature you control dies, create a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token. Modified is like if it's enchanted or has an aura or it has counters on it. These all count as modified. So I feel like I said earlier, this set is very crowded complexity-wise, and I feel like it's probably Wizards of the Coast testing the waters a bit. How much stuff can we fit into one set without alienating the players? Back in Future Sight, they tried to do something like this, and they felt like it wasn't a big seller. It was too complex. I think it kind of traumatized them. So after that, they basically only did it in sets that were specifically targeted at very enfranchised players, like the Horizon sets or the Masters set. So here they are doing it in just a regular set to see how it goes. And I think they will be pleasantly surprised. Like, again, looking to Yu-Gi-Oh! As an example, that's a game where the complexity creep kind of rivals the storied power creep of the game. They're always like slapping more text. Look at a modern Yu-Gi-Oh card. It's insane the amount of text they fit on this card. And yet it's a very popular game. As Paul, in your piece you mentioned from earlier this week about Magic streaming, Yu-Gi-Oh is like streamed all the time on Twitch too.
Very huge right now, yeah.
Very huge and very complex. So I'm excited for Wizards to do this as a modern player because we get a lot more kind of like juice and gas to mess with in the format. By the way, that Aki Emberkeeper is a common. I feel like this card could have been a rare just because of how complex it is and also how powerful the effect is. Like you can put this card with a sacrifice engine in any deck that has a lot of counters, bringing things back with counters, or in like the modular decks like Hardened Scales, you're basically doubling up on creatures. You lose your Arcbound Worker, you move the counter over, you get another one on the Ozolith, and you make a 1/1 Spirit. It's so much value coming out of every which way with this card, and it's a common, so maybe it was a rare and then they just shifted it down. They said, you know, we have more complex cards to put at rare, let's just put this one in common. So again, very exciting. I really like the direction that design is taking with Kamigawa and kind of the promise that it holds for future expansions, so long as the players take to it.
Very cool, very cool. David, what about you? What's got you most excited?
Well, Jordan went over the legendary lands and also the other lands, and I wasn't expecting that, though had them on backup in case he didn't. But for me, I sort of went a different direction. My first card that I want to talk about is one that is purely speculative, but it's one of those speculative picks where you say, you know, it doesn't take much for this to get out of hand, but the assumption is that it won't. And that is I'm going to probably butcher the name here, Tamishi Reality Architect. So for 2 and a blue, you get a 2/3, which on stats alone is not modern playable. However, Tamishi comes with 2 abilities that synchronize well and turn it into an engine. So first, what just has a static ability that whenever 1 or more non-creature permanents are returned to hand, anyone's hand, draw a card. This ability only triggers once per turn because Wizards has finally learned that repeatable effects can be pretty busted. And that's okay. We've seen stuff like that before. That's not playable. What is the second ability where for X and a white, and you return a land you control to its owner's hand, which triggers the static ability, you return target artifact or enchantment with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, which you can only activate as a sorcery because obviously instant speed would be far too good. And the reason Tamishi strikes me as something that could do a lot in Modern is that if you play Tamishi with a white open, you can activate it immediately to bring Urza's Saga from the graveyard back to the battlefield. And getting Saga back, a card already known to have tons of value, with a cantrip on top of that, even if Tamishi immediately eats a bolt afterwards, that's a pretty solid turn right there. That's a lot of value, and a whole bunch more value down the line as your Saga makes constructs and then gets to go tutoring. But that's just Tamishi being used in sort of the fair, and I am really emphasizing the air quotes on the fair part here, way. Is there more to be done here? I think there is a lot of potential for Tamishi to do something absurd. I don't know what that absurd thing is. I'm not a combo player. I can't think like that. But the amount of value and power in this card just seems like it's begging to be busted. And that's kept in check by the fact that it is just a creature card. It dies to all the removal played in Modern right now. But what if it doesn't? The possibilities start to boggle the mind. On a similar note, the second card that I was interested in is Reality Heist. It is expensive on the front face because, oh, I lost my spot on the spoiler here. It's basically dig through time, but only for artifacts. So I believe it's 5 and 2 blue to look at the top 7 cards of your library. look at the top 7 cards of your library, pick 2 artifacts and put them into your hand, and then everything else goes on the bottom in a random order. And that, that's commander fodder right there, but it has affinity for artifacts. I know it isn't keyworded, but that's affinity for artifacts right there, where it gets costs 1 colorless less for each artifact on the field. We already have a bunch of artifact decks that are playing Thoughtcast and Thought Monitor. Reality Heist probably doesn't fit into those decks because it's unnecessary. But if there's artifact combo decks out there, and there are some that are currently on the fair side of things, but could go unfair pretty quickly, Reality Heist is the enabler that will let it happen. Now, is that the way they want to go? I don't know. The format does seem to be ripe for exploitation by unfair decks, and it isn't happening yet. Maybe this changes things. But it's definitely one to keep an eye on. And my last card is actually, I'll be honest, it's kind of just one that I really like and I am definitely going to be playing, and that is March of Otherworldly Light. Now, Adam talked about March of Reckless Joy, and this is the other part of the cycle. It is X and a white, and you exile target artifact, creature, or enchantment with mana value X or less. It's an instant, and instead of paying mana for it, paying mana for the X, you can exile any number of white cards to reduce the cost of the X by 2. And there are 2 reasons this card is significant. One is that it works in monocolored decks. This has a lot of overlap with Prismatic Ending, but Prismatic Ending only works in 3+ colored decks, or at least it's only good there. March works in mono or 2 colored decks. It's most of the same stuff, but it's also an instant. And that's significant because, to tie it back to where I started, Urza's Saga can be exiled with March of Otherworldly Light. In fact, you can exile it in response to the first Saga trigger, meaning the land enters, never is able to make mana, and is gone forever. That might be significant. And simply exiling a creature, that's not bad either. So that's my pick, because I'm definitely going to be playing that card. I play a lot of 1 and 2 color decks, and not being able to Prismatic Ending things hurts me.
What deck do you see that sliding into the easiest?
Well, on my end, there are a lot of Death and Taxes players that are going to be trying this out. I am certainly amongst them. But it's also possible that depending on a few shifts in the meta, it might be something that Blue-White Control looks into. That deck has to splash a lot of off-color lands to make Ending good, and Ending is a critical part of that deck. It is conceivable, not necessarily likely, but it's conceivable that would push them to make some adjustments. Simply moving from sorcery to instant speed is a pretty big deal.
Okay, very cool. I'd like to have you, we'll move now into Legacy and kind of have you continue speaking the things that have been exciting you, and then we'll go to Beardy for his take on Legacy stuff. I'm sorry, I'm holding you, Beardy. I know you've got some cool stuff to chat about. I'm excited for it.
So basically continuing from where I left off, my number 1 card for Legacy is also incredibly self-serving because I am a Death and Taxes player. I'm going to be playing this card in my deck 100%, and that's Lion Sash. So Lion Sash is part of the new cycle from this set where you have artifact creatures that are also equipment. And this means that they can be searched out by Stormforge Mystic. So all of them get a boost in playability just for that. But Sash in particular fills a hole in Death and Taxes, because for 1 and a white, you get a 1/1 that has the Scavenging Ooze ability, but this time, instead of only getting counters on creatures, Lion Sash gets a +1/+1 counter for each permanent it exiles, meaning it grows for everything. You don't gain any life on it from it, but so that's something that's a negative compared to Ooze. especially in creature matchups. But being able to grow, period, is pretty big. And then it has reconfigure, which means it turns from an artifact creature to an artifact equipment, and you attach it to something. So if the Sash is on the field, I could just attach it to Flicker Wisp and fly over for massive damage, which is huge for Death and Taxes, just being able to break creature stalemates. But more importantly, this is significant because it main decks Graveyard Hate in Legacy, a format that is, when it isn't all about Delver of Secrets, it's currently about Euro, Titan of Nature's Wrath, and being able to exile that game one is going to be huge for me.
Do you think that that's going to also be a major player in Modern as well? Because one of the things that strikes me about it is that if you equip it to something, it's now essentially Wrath immune. Your opponent wraths the board, and then you still have this guy left over.
You aren't wrong there, but it's a question of space. The main Stoneforge Mystic deck we have in Modern is Hammer Time, and this is not the sort of thing that Hammer Time usually wants to be doing because they don't usually have spare mana.
Okay.
Death and Taxes in Legacy absolutely does. I am definitely going to be testing Sash in Modern, but I'm a little bit skeptical that the formats where Sash is going to shine, whereas there are plenty of things for Sash to eat in Legacy and that you want to eat.
Okay.
If I can jump in about that, I think Sash has pretty low opportunity costs in a lot of Stoneforge Mystics decks, and Hammer Time will probably want one just so that they can be tutoring up Graveyard Hate. But I agree with David, the space is a lot tighter in Modern decks. They have less mana because the format is so fast, and at the same time, it's very, very small removal centric. So Line Sash is gonna be hit by a Flame Slash type cards all the time, like Unholy Heap. It's just squishier there.
Yeah, totally.
Legacy decks because they have to play Spell Pierce type cards for the combo.
For sure.
Notably, though, with Hammer Time in particular, so you have access to Pure Steel Paladin as well as Sigarda's Aid, both of which actually still work with the reconfigure cards. So it will give it equip 0. So instead of paying the 4 mana to reconfigure to turn from creature into just non-creature equipment, you can just do it for the 0 mana or instant speed 0 mana equip. So Stoneforge can find it.
So Pure Steel Paladin actually doesn't work with these because they don't have an equip ability.
No. So Paladin gives it equip 0 as an additional effect. I believe Forsyth confirmed that will be a function of the cards.
Okay.
And also being Graveyard Hate lets it work with your Lurrus deck against the other Lurrus decks. So I think it's a mirror breaker card for the Lurrus matchup.
Potentially, but the way those matchups have played out so far, it's always been about who basically punches the other one in the teeth the first. So we're going to have to see. Hammer Time is actually in a transitional spot in the meta. It's changing a lot. So it might go the way where Lion Sash is played a lot. It might not see any play at all. It's one of those where I don't know which way it's going to go, and it could go great and become a major player. We might shift to where Lion Sash sees no play, and I'm not sure which way we're going yet.
Okay.
Also to that point, just going to the Hammer Time specific part of this, with the deck that preys on Hammer being Grixis Shadow and those red-black rock decks with infinite kill spells, those decks are somewhat graveyard reliant to be able to get, they are very much a Lurrus deck, and they work with Dragon Rage Channeler, right? So being able to turn off Channeler in the same way that Endurance turns off Channeler, or interacting with your Murktide deck to stop them from being able to cast the Murktide, it's a low opportunity cost because you have Stoneforge, so it's already +1 card. And you get to have a half measure hate piece for your main deck against a lot of things the metagame is doing.
Very cool.
Yeah,
So
it makes sense, but we'll have to see on that.
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. Moving back to Legacy, because I took us on a tangent there. I'm trying to be mindful of time for everybody. What else in Legacy's got you excited?
Okay, so next is another really speculative card that gets the brewing juices flowing, but I don't know if it's actually good. And that is Experimental Synthesizer. So it's 1 red mana, it's an artifact, and when it enters or leaves the battlefield, you exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card. So as Jordan and others have discussed already, and Adam led off with, that ability in red is quite powerful in a lot of different contexts. But by itself, it wouldn't be much. Now you can sacrifice it for 2 red to make a 2/2 white samurai with vigilance, and that's cool. But in Legacy, that's going to be mostly desperation text for when stuff has gone wrong, because this strikes me as the sort of card that works really well with Goblin Welder. All the Welder decks are looking for cheap artifacts that have effects when they enter or leave the battlefield to build up to whichever combo they're playing. It's usually Painter, Servant, and Grindstone, but there are a few other variants. But all of those decks have a weakness where they run out of fuel. They need very specific cards to do anything. And this being something that is an artifact to weld into and out of play and dig through your deck strikes me as a possibility. And the amount of card advantage you could potentially get out of it if Welder survives, which is entirely plausible in Legacy, seems like it's going to be quite powerful. And then finally are the ninjas. Blue-black ninjas is a Legacy deck. I don't think any of the individual ninjas by themselves warrant inclusion in that deck, but there is one, or rather the Planeswalker ninja, that just might make it. So Kaito Shizuki is 1 colorless, blue and a black, for a Planeswalker with 3 loyalty, but the first turn you play it, he phases out at the end of your turn, meaning your opponent can't just attack him down immediately, which is a brand new thing for Planeswalkers. And just like the Wandering Emperor, that's by itself is quite a powerful ability. Now, Kaito's +1 is draw a card and then discard unless you've attacked this turn. But in Legacy ninjas, they play stuff like Ornithopter and all the ninja cards as well. They would plausibly be attacking on the turn they play Kaito, and they can also protect Kaito with Force of Will. He also makes threats with his down tick. The -2 ability is to create a 1/1 blue ninja with this creature can't be blocked. When it doesn't have Retrofit or Refinery out, or even if the opponent just has any creatures, blue-black ninjas tends to stall out. Kaito can break that, not in a particularly efficient way, but it's on theme and provides ninjas that most importantly trigger the ninja abilities to draw additional cards. And finally, his ultimate is a -7 to get an emblem. Wherever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, search your library for a blue or black creature card and put it onto the battlefield and then shuffle. Again, stalling out is a big problem, and not having much board space is a problem for blue-black ninjas. Kaito seems like it would slot in and solve at least some of the problems that deck has. And that's intriguing to me.
I didn't even realize ninjas and Legacy was a thing. So my mind is totally blown right now, even hearing about it. It's making me want to go build the deck right now.
Oh, that's the reaction people usually get when they hear ninjas is a Legacy deck.
Very cool. So let's continue with Beardy. What's got you excited for Legacy?
Well, let's go on that same theme. And I thought 5 out of my 6 wouldn't be talked about, but it's 4 out of 6. I have both Jordan and David to thank for that. But I want to talk about Secluded Courtyard for Legacy, and this is a good thing to talk about right here, because it opens up for Legacy as well interesting like tier 1.5 tribal decks. Now you can play them in Legacy as well. Obviously it's helping Modern, and Legacy has more lands to choose from, but this is just more better. we've had the pirate deck for a little bit of time. Obviously, humans. Slivers has been a tier 1.5 deck at times in Legacy. So adding another prismatic rainbow land that, thanks Wizards, taps to activate abilities as well, it's just going to make the format even better. And yeah, just like Ninjas is a playable deck, so has Slivers been in the past. Obviously, we have things like Goblins and Merfolk and so on, but there could be a great Legacy Spirits deck. I know there's been several pretty successful modern Spirits decks, but maybe in the future with more 5-color lands, Spirits could become this tier 1.5 or better tribal deck, even for Legacy as well. So Secluded Courtyard, we've already talked about it a little bit, but I think that's a good future-looking card as well. And then I'll just briefly talk about, March of Otherworldly Light, the white March card. I think it'll be just as good in Legacy for the reasons that David said. It's a good way to hit Aether Vial, Chalice of the Void, and Urza Saga, and creature lands as well, all for 1 or 2 mana. And again, great in monocolor decks, finally. Definitely competes with Prismatic Ending in various matchups. I think it'll see plenty of play in Legacy as well as Modern, both formats. Now to talk about something that no one has talked about yet, although David talked about Welder. Here's another potential Welder entry, Containment Construct. So this is a 2-mana artifact creature. It's a 2/1. It has, whenever you discard a card, you may exile that card from your graveyard. If you do, you may play that card this turn. So it turns every draw and discard outlet into Expressive Iteration, and we know how much everyone likes that card. This turns Faithless Looting into draw 4. That's pretty cool. And speaking of Kamigawa, this has some synergy with one of the worst cards in Magic, one of the worst cards from Saviors of Kamigawa. Anybody know it? 1 with nothing. He's got it. 1 with nothing. Discard your hand. 1 black mana. Discard your hand. Well, with Containment Construct, you could now play your hand from that discard. I just thought that was an interesting nod, and I wonder if the designers were thinking about any kind of interaction. I am ready for 1 with nothing to become this unbelievable 1-mana card. And I think as they keep manufacturing these styles of cards, we may see that card actually be part of a degenerate combo deck.
Actually, it's not necessarily 1 with nothing, but in a similar vein. One player cracked the code, so to speak. So the other combo piece with Containment Construct is Artificer's Intuition.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you want to talk on this, Beardy, but I literally just brought up the diagram to be able to run through. Yep. So Artificer's Intuition is a card from, I believe, Mirrodin. Either Mirrodin or Fifth Ton, forgive me, I don't recall. 1 blue for an enchantment. Blue, discard an artifact from your hand, search your library for an artifact card with CMC, or I guess mana value 1 or less, reveal it, put it in your hand. So if you have Construct in play, and you have Artificer's Intuition, 3 blue mana available with any artifact in hand. Activate Artificer's Intuition, discard a random artifact, get LED, you have blue available, 3 LED in your deck. Activate it, discard LED, get LED number 2, blue available, 2 LED in the deck, cast LED, blah, blah. Then the last one that you get is Elixir of Immortality, which shuffles everything back into your deck. You crack your LED in response, you get an additional a couple blue mana. Effectively, this gives you Infinite Storm, infinite mana, and then you have an infinite mana outlet or Infinite Storm outlet to go off with that. So you can find like Walking Ballista to kill your opponent. It's small, it's compact, they're all artifacts, and it's in blue, which is already a benefit in Legacy.
Yep, and it proves that LED actually better than Black Lotus because you can play 4 of them. Yep. Absolutely insane card. Combos perfectly with LED straight up. You don't need anything else. It just allows you to use it as Black Lotus. And then also in a nod to Vintage, not to talk about Vintage, but this card, Containment Construct with Bazaar of Baghdad. All of a sudden, that much better. I think this card may be significantly under the radar. I know it costs 2 mana, which is a sin, but it's 2 colorless mana. It's quite easy to cast, and decks could just go off with it. So I'm very excited for the types of decks that can emerge from these types of cards as well. I think they've done a good job here.
Very cool. So let's pivot now from Legacy to Commander, Beardy. We don't have the full Commander decks yet. Those aren't going to be available for next week. But let's talk about the main set cards and the kind of the set booster cards that have already been spoiled. What of those has you psyched for Commander?
So instead of talking about the legendary channel lands, which obviously are going to be great, everyone's going to run, they're cool. I'm looking at Roadside Reliquary. So it's just a uncommon non-basic land that taps for a colorless mana, but also you can pay 2 and sacrifice it, draw a card if you control an artifact, draw a card if you control an enchantment. So that's 2 card draws off of a land for only 2 colorless mana. That's really good. That's surprisingly good. I think that card will see a significant amount of play. Maybe not in competitive Commander, but in casual Commander. Yeah, this is just free card draw for any deck. The conditions are quite easy to get 1 card, and oftentimes you'll get 2. Just surprising. And I wonder how good that particular card will be in Standard itself. I don't know if it'll be great, but when you put card draw on a land, looking at you, Library, it can get out of control really quickly. Obviously, this is nowhere near Library's power, but this is one of the better card drawing lands that they've made in quite some time. So I think this could see significant amounts of play. Also, and I'm doubling up here in terms of the black color pie, but there are a couple other black cards that I'm looking forward to for Commander. Invoke Despair. So black sorcery here. Quad black and 1. Target opponent sacrifices a creature. If they can't, they lose 2 life and you draw a card. Then repeat this process for an enchantment and a planeswalker. So a potential draw 3, a potential 3 edicts. In multiplayer, I think this card is very flexible. And black, I would say, except for tutoring, which is the ultimate flexibility, except for that, black doesn't have a lot of these kind of great modal cards that are sort of like this, where it can kind of do everything. And of course, Wizards has started to give black enchantment removal, like significant amounts of enchantment removal. It's kind of funny, in fact, but this is now
at least 1 every set now, isn't it?
Well, there's 2 in just Kamigawa. There's just 2 in this set.
Oh wow.
Yeah, which is really interesting, but I guess black needs enchantment removal. There are a significant amount of enchantments, the shrines and so on. So pretty interesting card for me. And again, looking at it from a Commander viewpoint and multiplayer, you get to pick. You're picking who is doing this. So you are choosing, are you getting rid of a creature? Are you drawing a card? How many enchantments are you getting rid of? How many cards are you drawing? You're getting the flexibility of this. So I thought that was an interesting card for Commander. And quad black, I'm a big fan of these kind of chromatic spells. I think they should make more of them. Don't make things cost like 5 colorless. Come on, put in some mana symbols, make it more fun for everybody. And then finally, again, from what has been spoiled already, I'm really excited for Nashi, Moon Sage's Scion. So it's a 3 mana, 3/2 rat ninja. And of course, it's a ninja. It's got ninjutsu for 4. When it deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of each player's library. Each player, so that's everybody in multiplayer. Awesome. Until end of turn, you may play 1 of those cards, so you get tremendous selection. And if you cast the spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost. So it's attacking in, exiling everybody's top card, and then playing a free spell for life. I think this is a pretty awesome Commander. You could use it, in this style of deck where you play, for instance, Xanathar from Adventures in the Forgotten Realm, which allows you to play other people's decks. Mind Flayer, the Shadow from the Stranger Things release, which allows you to play cards from other people's decks. This thing, you don't have to play a single card. You could just play these cards and a bunch of swamps and islands if you're going to go with Xanathar, and just play other people's decks. So more of these types of cards, I think, for Commander, for multiplayer, I think they're really fun for certain types of players. I think they're going to enjoy this card quite a bit. And it's just got great flavor, really powerful ninjutsu ability, really great for multiplayer. I'm very excited for it. And they have a lot of legendaries this set, which is great. So there are a lot of choices. I had to just make a couple, but this one I think is the one I'm looking forward to most.
How casual versus CEDH do you see this?
It's unfortunate. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I don't think it can reach competitive levels because to ninjutsu it's 4 mana and you already have to have a creature in play, which I don't know. I mean, turn 3, turn 4 is where things start to go end game for competitive commander. But outside of that, for casual, I think this is powerful enough that it'll be fun to play and you'll want to play it, and it won't be a bad card. So, and I don't think it's unfair or oppressive. I think every once in a while you floop into play something ridiculous, the table groans a little bit, you pay 12 life, and then play continues on. So I think it'll be really fun for your casual multiplayer cubes. Competitive, I can't see it there unless you have some really crazy strategy involving just casting this and hoping that when you attack on turn 4, it just does a thing, or maybe you played Greaves on turn 2. So maybe on turn 3, you just play a thing. And the nice part about talking about cards like this that steal other people's cards, in competitive events, everybody's playing very high-powered cards. So the fact that you're going to steal something very high-powered it's like 100%. You're definitely going to get something really good. So it could be some kind of a mono black deck, some kind of a Voltron deck where you're using Nashi to win, but it won't be super consistent, which obviously all competitive decks are seeking to be ultra consistent. This is much more a nod towards fun. So it could be a thing, but probably not. Probably just for casual.
Okay. Very cool. Let's change pace now. Adam, I kind of have you here talking about Pioneer, Historic, both on the list. I would like to maybe try and shorten our conversation tonight and just have you talk about things that overlap, if you have any overlaps between those.
Yeah. So I actually also wanted to highlight Alchemy a little bit, but I think the main piece is we already talked about Reality Heist, so I think we can skip that. The Historic Affinity deck is very similar to the modern one, in that it's trying to play, Thought Monitor, Thoughtcast. So just having your copy 9 through 12 for that deck is amazing. I want to highlight Lightpaw's Emperor's Voice for Historic specifically. So sorry, I need to find my spreadsheet again. Okay, so Lightpaws is 1 and a white for a 2/2 legendary creature, Fox Advisor. Whenever an aura enters the battlefield under your control, if you cast it, you can search your library for an aura with mana value less than or equal to that aura with a different name than each other aura you control. Put that card onto the battlefield attached to Lightpaws, then shuffle. So this card fits in the same space as SRAM, fits in the same space as Core Spirit Dancer for the white-based aura deck. So there's an Abzan version, there's a white-black version, and there's a white-blue version. The Black Splash gets you the black enchantments. Virtually all of them cost 1 mana. So anyone that you find finds you a different one. The black ones let you protect your creature. So it's as if this creature would die or be exiled, return to play or return to hand, depending on which one you have. All of the white ones add some sort of stat buff or draw a card or have some additional value of some sort. And the blue ones are almost all curiosity variants. So between actual curiosity, between Curious Obsession, and I'm blanking on the white and the blue one that also gives lifelink, you get a lot of redundancy in effects across different card names. And being able to effectively draw a card each time you put it on this lets you have your extra engine piece. So I see that deck playing 4 copies of Core Spirit Dancer, some combination of 6 copies between SRAM and what is this card? Lightpaws. So that gives you a critical mass of having your combo engine and then having your payoffs. It also helps you not draw too many redundant pieces. It helps you to not flood out. It fills a role for that deck that you don't otherwise get. My next one, also for Historic, was Lion Sash, but I also like Reinforced Ronin. So Reinforced Ronin is a 1 mana red creature, artifact creature, I believe, with haste. And I need to find it. Here we go. Haste. Beginning of your end step, return to your hand, and then channel 1 or red, discard it, draw a card. So this is Goblin Guide at home, but for formats that don't have Goblin Guide, you are able to get a lot of very quick damage in with a 1-drop 2/2 haste creature in red. And then when it's no longer relevant, you're able to pitch it to draw additional card. I think that it's able to chip in for probably between 4 and 6 points of damage before your opponent's able to stabilize, potentially even more than that. And then when it's no longer relevant, you're able to exchange it for something else. That is above rate for what you can expect for that mana cost. And jumping around formats, no, we can stay on this one. Goro, Disciple of Ryusei is actually my favorite one to talk about for tonight.
Okay.
1 in a red, legendary creature, Goblin Samurai, activated ability, red. Creatures you control get haste until end of turn. 3 red, make a 5/5 dragon spirit with flying, activate only if you control an attacking modified creature. So this works with Bard Storm. Bard class Storm, which is kind of a fringe deck in Pioneer that's kind of also making a little bit of splashes in Modern, not a ton. But the goal of it is to reduce the casting cost of all of your legendary creatures with Bard class. And then each spell that you play finds you 2 more cards off the top that you can cast until the end of turn. And since you have reduced the casting cost of all your spells to either 0 or near 0, you're able to just chain through your entire deck. This being able to be a haste enabler for that deck says, okay, I've now put 30 bodies on board. Now I can attack. I don't have to wait for an extra turn. That way you don't get an opportunity to wrath me. I think that it's excellent to close out games with. And then the very last thing I wanted to mention here is in Alchemy. You have the cycle of mythic rare dragons, the dragon spirits, the spiritual successors of like Ryusei and was it Kaiga. Specifically, the red, the white, and the blue one. I don't necessarily need to go into all the abilities here, but there is already a tier 1 dragon deck in Alchemy. And it's able to use, Orb of Dragonfire? Or Orb of Dragonkind?
Orb of Dragonkind, yeah.
Yeah. Which filters into any combination of other colors, or any combination of colors. So the casting cost on these is not super relevant. You have a bunch of dragon mana fixing actually in your land slot as well for that format, and you have cards that are able to reduce the cost. Those decks are already playing things like Ancient Gold Dragon and Iremith, in addition to just a slew of 4/4 red dragons. You have hit the mark on all 3 of these as potential includes. And because these cards care about when they die, in addition to just being big beaters in the air, your opponent's going to have a lot of trouble getting rid of them in a way that doesn't actually just kill them outright either way. It's kind of like a darned if you do, darned if you don't against this big evasive threat. And so I think that gives the deck an additional level of consistency. So those are my main picks for both Historic, Pioneer, and Alchemy.
Let's open it up. Let's get everybody's kind of takes. Just kind of quick sum up things for people. Let's start with Adam.
As Jordan said earlier, the set has a high complexity level, which I really enjoy. I think that it's going to be engaging. It's going to be complicated. It's going to be difficult to kind of learn the opening lanes. But as Paul actually mentioned, I think that the archetypes are themselves pretty clear. We have multiple signpost uncommons that tell you very clearly this is what you want to do, and this is the kind of payoffs that you want. And I think that we have a critical mass in most of these to get where you need to be. Specifically, I think that we have enough payoffs for your ninja decks. I think that the sacrifice deck has a fair amount of payoffs, and they're strong. They're fascinating. We have a handful of vehicles, which frankly, I don't necessarily know how to evaluate at the moment, and what the pilot tokens are going to be able to do for the format. I think it's just a fascinating take on Magic that we haven't really seen before. We haven't seen artifact creatures coexisting aside enchantment creatures in this capacity. There's so much to to look at and enjoy. And I think each draft or seal pool that you're going to have is going to take you in a very different direction.
Beardy, what are your thoughts on this format overall? This new set.
Yeah, it just looks amazing. Legendary Dragon Cycle, Legendary Land Cycle, March Cycle, Shrine Cycle, Lycids. Who remembers Lycids? The creature that could turn into an enchantment aura, right?
Yeah.
They've done it again, right? This is from Stronghold 1998. And of course, all the Kamigawa flavor is here. You've got your ninjas, you've got your spirits, you've got absolutely everything. They even had a nod to divinity counter. I guess they didn't want to use the word divinity, but it's in the spirits are indestructible if you cast them. It just looks like a great set. Draft also looks really good. I also look forward to not playing an Innistrad draft again for a long time. I have not been happy with a lot of the return to sets. This one looks really good. So I have big expectations, but it looks like they're able to deliver on them because there's so much going on, which us old timers, I guess, really appreciate. But I think new timers are going to get all of that flavor all at once. They're going to get injected with the Kamigawa flavor.
Very cool. David, what about you?
So the first thing with this set is it highlights how you can play with or against a card for years without ever really understanding how it works, because I always thought, because this is how it's played, that Pure Steel Paladin's ability was a cost reducer. I didn't know it added an entirely new thing. So that's a big lesson there. But it also seems to be the same case for Wizards, because I think the first article I ever read about Magic was when I was a kid, Mark Rosewater's article about the Lycid cycle and why they would never do it again. And yet here it is as reattach. So it shows just how much the game changes over time. But sort of the big other thing that I want to add that hasn't been talked about here is you look at so many of these cards and they get you thinking. And that's important because a lot of these are really on the borderline of being playable in a lot of different formats. Now, there's not enough time for us to talk about all of them, obviously, but a lot of cards here I was really on the fence about. These aren't the big three, but they're so close that I want to talk about it anyway. But if I do that, it's going to take all day. So this is a good format, and it's going to be a very interesting set from what actually makes the cut here, because there's a lot that could go in many directions. And I'm fascinated to see how it goes.
We also didn't mention the meme culture and the nerd culture that they have injected into the set, right? Like, we have a Ninja Turtle card, we have a Master Splinter card, we have a Voltron card, where you're just stapling 5 artifact creatures together to make a giant mech. We have You Are Already Dead, which is like, I'm going to butcher this, Omewoma Shindaru, the
Omewoma Shindaru, yes.
Thank you, from, was it Fist of the North Star? Like,
Fist of the North Star.
Like, they took a lot of liberties. They had people that loved this. They loved the culture. They were well versed in it, and they were able to make a faithful Magic interpretation of it. And I think it was successful in execution.
I definitely agree 100%. I think it's that they swung for the fences and they connected on every level. Flavor-wise, mechanics. I don't see a single thing that I look at when I look at this set and I'm not super jazzed about it. Whereas, we're going back to Innistrad. That's cool, I guess. Vampire Wedding, well, that's cheesy. This is just like everything about this set. I look at it and I'm just nerded out. I'm just like, that is so awesome. I'm like the kid in the Incredibles movie, that was totally wicked. I'm just so excited about everything with this set that I'm just glowing.
It reminds me of when we went to Innistrad the first time, when we went to Theros the first time, and they had these cards that were very clear allusions to existing stories and myths. Being able to draw upon that and do it so well. And I think, while I'm not the biggest fan of having like 15 different art treatments on every single card in the set, I think that it really helps here because it gives us a lot of ways to view Kamigawa, especially through these additional lenses. And I think that it really speaks to every facet of their audience.
Very cool. Well, I want to wrap things up right here. I feel like we're all jazzed, and ending on a jazzed high note is a great note to end on. I want to thank everybody who's still here on the panel. Jordan did have to cut out a little early, but I want to thank everybody who was involved in the panel tonight for being part of this. Thank everybody for listening. Again, quietspeculation.com. Check us out. We've got articles, videos, all kinds of stuff. New stuff goes up every day, Monday through Friday. So definitely please check us out there. And if you like what we're doing, please subscribe. Please subscribe to the podcast. We're going to have this on all of the podcast services. We're working on that now, not just YouTube. So you should be able to subscribe and check us out there if you'd prefer to listen instead of watch. So please check us out there, and we will talk to you all in the next episode. Have a great night.
Good day, everybody.
Good one.
Good night.